Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all our participants, dignitaries, and our esteemed guest speakers to the India How to Protect Your Business from Cyber Attacks, organized by the INC Chamber of Commerce and Industry. All participants will be muted to avoid any disturbances during the course of this session. To consume less bandwidth and have clarity, you may like to stop video streaming at your end. Kindly post all your relevant queries in the chat section so that the same can be addressed during the Q&A session. And most important, please give us your feedback. The feedback link will be posted on your chat so that we can make our sessions better and better with the suggestions given by you. So, to begin the session, may I request Mr. Anand Singhania, President, INC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to present the welcome address. Over to you, Mr. Singhania.
Thank you, Selby. A very good afternoon to all the panelists, the speakers, all the attendees for this very important session on how to protect your business from cyber attacks. The internet is omnipresent. The digital device, whether it's a mobile or your smartwatch, the wearables, the computers, the iPads, everything is omnipresent. We take these digital devices everywhere, wherever we go, even when we go to the toilet, which is a personal space. And therefore, any cyber attack on any of our digital devices actually invades into our privacy, be it even your Google Homes and Echoes, which are at home. If somebody attacks into it, they can actually hear your conversation, be it in your home, which is a completely private place, or your office. So this program is very well required to understand the nuances of how cyber crimes happen. How do you protect yourself and your business? Because ultimately, your mobile is probably the easiest first source for people to access you and your data, your email, your ERP, your data records, and then through that to your business at large. So as you know, cybercrime and e-frauds are one of the major threats to the advancing digital world, which is cruising in the cloud and the internet today. This is especially so important as a pandemic had allowed us to move major operations around the world onto the cloud. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency reported in February of last year that ransomware incidents happened in 14 out of 16 critical US infrastructure sectors. Imagine a power plant or a nuclear power plant becoming a matter of cyber attack. We've definitely heard from our friends that email accounts, websites have been attacked. Cyber terrorists have taken over their websites and they demand a pound of flesh, that too with bitcoins and crypto, to release you from that ransom. So the undoubting internet users need to be aware on how to safeguard themselves from business, mobile, digital e-frauds and hacks. This is proving to be the significant challenge in the world we live in. And if you look at the Industrial Revolution 4.0, we're talking of more and more the IoT of things. Going into your coffee machine, your washing machine, maybe even the door of your the cars. Anyway, we already have electronic cars. So this is a big issue. In 2021, India reported over 53,000 incidents of cyber crimes, an increase of almost 6% from the year before. I must say that several cyber crimes are either go completely unnoticed or people are not able to understand how to report it. In many times, foreign agents are stealing the stealth technology, they're hacking heads of state, they're sabotaging the companies. There's, the warfare is happening even across companies on the cyber side. While many of these attacks are traced to foreign countries, electronic espionage is so difficult that it knows no national boundaries. Cybercrime steal important secret information and they hack networks for monetary gains, political purposes, and they also are constantly engineering new technologies that we do not have the knowledge and to track. Cyber espionage is also conducted for the purpose of stealing trade secrets so as to obtain a more competitive edge or to develop and then launch a product at the same time as its original manufacturer or even before. It's a direct threat to national security worldwide as well as to enterprises. A balance needs to be struck between the privacy and security, for which it is very important that internet users must not disregard the potential security risk for the need and the necessity of being constantly connected. SMEs and MSMEs, which are a large part of our membership base, are actually at the highest risk of these cyber attacks due to their lack of knowledge and perhaps the ever forward-looking, or let's say difficult cyber crime makers. To dispel all of this and to help us to decide what we should do and to lay a pathwork, on how businesses can protect themselves, we have a distinguished array of speakers who are not only going to warn us, but also may make us aware of the various risks involved and the measures that need to be taken to stay safe as far as possible. We are grateful to our speakers, Mr. Parvinder Kaur, Director, Frost and Sullivan, Mr. Mubin Sheikh, Partner, Cybersecurity Technology Consulting, and from EY LLP, and Mr. Rajiv Singh, Founder CEO of Quant Samurai, a global cybersecurity entity who have removed the time from their busy schedule to address us today. This session will be moderated by Mr. Uday Sanghai, who's our global digital leader, and he's an IMC member. All our distinguished speakers come from very varied and very interesting backgrounds. I'll leave it to our moderator to happily introduce them. This event has been organized by our Digital Technology Committee, which is done this to educate IMC members on the various activities by which an innocent and an unsuspecting user or an organization might plunge into a quarry of cyber espionage through their very ordinary daily routine activity on the internet. And lastly, before we initiate this event, I must welcome you all to the IMC Chamber, which is a 115-year-old chamber. We have about 5,000 members, and we have about 22 expert committees. This being one of them. We have industry, we have banking, we have taxation. And each of these committees, they bring out a framework so that we can help our members to grow. And I have chosen partnering for growth as my theme. And I hope that these events like this can help us to help each of us to grow in our own ways. And besides these 5,000 members, we have about 150 trade associations who are members. And through them, we have a reach of around 400,000 members. With these few words, I welcome you all for this very interesting session and look forward for you to really open up our minds in terms of what lurks behind those closed computer screens. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Singhania. Now, without much ado, I hand over to Mr. Uday Sanghani, member, IMC Digital Technology Committee and a global digital leader, to initiate this session. Over to you, Mr. Sanghani.
Thank you very much, Selvi. Thank you so much, Mr. Singhania, for opening the session and for your brief introduction to the topic today. Good afternoon to all of you who have joined us from your very busy schedules and to discuss the importance of cybersecurity for your businesses today in the country. As you all know, the business world is becoming increasingly digital, and with that comes a growing number of cyber threats. These threats can come in many forms, from phishing scams, malware to ransomware and data breaches. And we're going to discuss about all of that shortly. And we're going to get into the fundamentals, into the essentials of all of these different ways in which your business could be attacked. And while these attacks may seem like they only happen to large corporations, the truth is that MSME businesses are just as likely to be targeted. In fact, according to a recent study, 43% of the cyber attacks are aimed at small businesses. So the consequences of the cyber attack can be devastating for your business. Not only can it result in the loss of sensitive data, but it can also harm your company's reputation and lead to financial losses. In extreme cases, it can even put a business out of operation. So that's why it's so much important and very relevant for us to discuss this in great depths, discuss the fundamentals, discuss the essentials of what you need to do in your business. That's very important, right? The why, the what, how, and what should be the first few steps. But what's most important is, where do you start? So we're going to get into all of these questions, and we've got very eminent panelists, as Mr. Singhania mentioned. But let me just go a little deeper and introduce them. The first panelist that I would like to introduce is Mr. Mobeen Sheikh. He's the partner with the Cyber Security Technology Consulting, EYLLP, a very good friend and a very well-known partner in the industry. Mobeen has over 20 years of professional experience in areas of cybersecurity, technology risk, business continuity risk, and third-party risk management. Mobeen has information cybersecurity and risk consulting experience, which is largely client-facing, account management, and many leadership roles with the Big Four, both in India as well as managing businesses at a global level. He has worked extensively in the cybersecurity strategy space for top 100 organizations in India as well as in Saudi Arabia. He has a unique blend of cyber experience covering security strategy, governance, security testing, incident response management, and situational awareness initiatives. He has vast exposure in USA, India, Switzerland, France, Japan, UAE, almost all parts of the globe. Welcome, Mobeen. I would now like to introduce my second speaker, that is Mr. Rajiv Singh. Mr. Rajiv Singh is the founder, CEO of Quant Samurai. It's a global cybersecurity entity. He's on the advisory board of the Center for Innovation Commercialization, USA. He's on the advisory board of School of Cyber Peace, India. Mr. Singh has entrepreneurial experience. He's been the founder CEO of IndiCash, founder CEO of ACC PAC. And his leadership experience prior to getting into his own venture, he's been the global head of cybersecurity for Tech Mahindra, is the managing director for Entrust Datacard USA, president Tata Communications Banking Infra Solutions Limited. And he's also been a managing director at Computer Associates USA. So vast experience, and there's a lot that he could share with all of us today. He's a trusted security advisor to the government, law enforcement, military, and enterprise across global markets. Experience with military-grade cybersecurity technologies and services. There are a lot of national security initiatives of the Ministry of Home, Financial Intelligence, and National Threat Intelligence Exchange. He's done a good amount of design and build work there, mentoring cyber startups, which is of extreme importance. So let me just take a few seconds to tell you that he's really helped startups from Data Security Council of India, Stanford University, cyber startup, Silicon Valley, US, and Israeli startup ecosystem, Tel Aviv. I would also like to now introduce our speaker, Ms. Parminder Kaur. Ms. Parminder Kaur is the director with Frost & Sullivan, and she's the director with the cybersecurity business unit, and she has over 19 years of strategic consulting and project management experience across India, Middle East, and APAC, which include client management and liaising with internal project teams. Parminder has experience covering broad range of sectors, including cybersecurity and ICT, like IT products and services, unified communication, telecommunication services, data center and cloud, and a number of other areas of the business. The reason I took a bit of a time to introduce my panelists and I went into depth just so that everybody on the call really understands and appreciates the kind of depth of knowledge that they bring today to this forum. And in the event in the future that you would like to reach out to them for further assistance and guidance, they would be more than happy to do so. So let me start and request Ms. Parminder Kaur to open up this event by sharing some eye-opening facts about what's happening with regards to cybersecurity and how much of a damage could a cyber attack cause today to the Indian MSME business. Over to you, Parminder.
Thank you so much, Uday, for that quick background and introduction, and thank you also, Mr. Anand, for having us here today. I'm happy to be here on the panel and talking about one of the interesting topics, which is cybersecurity, and also to be accompanied today with an esteemed panel with other speakers today. So without much ado, I'll come quickly to this topic. Like, while I say that it's a pretty much interesting topic, it is also pretty vast, right? And I'm sure that with a lot of digital transformation that most of your organizations are going through, there must already be a maturity curve in your organizations. However, I strongly see from when we analyze different markets, right, that SME sector today is not really investing as much into the cybersecurity space. And of course, there are multiple reasons, for the SME sector as such in India to be at that kind of a maturity curve. But the need for the sector to invest in security is so strong. And we will talk about the key trends and the key challenges that the sector is facing. However, given a broad perspective of why we should really look at protecting, the businesses from cyber attacks, right? Like I said, we are all in a different stage of digital transformation. We've invested into different technologies, and the last 2 decades, the industry, whether I'm talking about industrial, automotive, banking sector, any sector you name it, has invested heavily into different types of digital transformation solutions. We've looked at plethora of devices, endpoints coming into our network infrastructure. We've looked at different servers. We have data residing on premise. We have data on the cloud. And now to give everything a boost in the last 2 years with COVID really impacting, every business has given a flexibility for users now to work remote. We have our different, when you look at the entire value chain of the industry, there are many different industries which will have to give access to your third parties, to your distributors, dealers, to also come and be part of your entire network ecosystem. So what has happened really is, the complexity of your infrastructure itself has, significantly increased. But the more we invest in these digital technologies, because we've not taken security as a prime, investment area when we started looking at digital technologies, we kind of missed looking at the important aspects and the important and the key risk that these digital transformation technologies can really do to our infrastructure, to our networks, right? So on one side, while these technologies and these transformation is important, we really need to be there, competing with our peers, and to stay ahead of that curve, we have to look at these kind of transformation. But what I want to say is that we parallelly need to look at the cyber risk that will come to your network and plan and be in, have a right strategic goal to looking at, how to look at an inclusive cybersecurity strategy along with your digital transformation objective. So giving, a quick overview and, some of the trends, Mr. Uday was also trying to talk about, how SMEs today are witnessing almost 43%. We have a similar statistic of about 40 to 45% of SMEs witnessing cyber threats in 2022. And SME sector in India as such, if you see, we are talking about 2.5 lakh organized SMEs, while the overall number of SMEs may be much higher and over 5 to 6 lakhs. I talk about organized SMEs here, where I believe that these are the organizations who come with at least decent IT spending, and also at the same time, they do have budgets to look at cybersecurity spends. So with these 2.5 lakh organized SMEs that we're talking about in India, we just see that, of the total 3.3 billion spending that is happening in India on a cybersecurity market spending, only 33% of this contribution is coming from the SME sector. But given the fact, and if you look at the other trends, India itself has witnessed over 6.7 lakhs, incidents in cybersecurity only in the H1 of 2022. We still do not have the H2 2022 figures to kind of, put up here. There has been 51% spike in ransomware. Phishing attacks have increased by 87%. There are more than 2,200 attacks per day, which means that one attack is happening every 39 seconds. Manufacturing sector has been one of the key targeted industries in the SME sector. Also, if you look at from the entire things that are happening around the cybersecurity, different types of cyber threats that are happening, in our ecosystem, there are different initiatives that even the governments are taking today to improve the cybersecurity posture, right? So there has been a mandate by the CERT-In to report cybersecurity threats in 6 hours. While this currently is a mandate to large enterprises, there was, few months back, there was a little bit of push to have this in the SME sector also. But knowing that SME currently is not prepared with the right infrastructure to report these kind of threats in 6 hours, there has been a little bit of leeway, but we will see more and more mandates even come into the SME sector, which means that today the SME sector, besides looking at just the spending that they have, almost, I should say, of the total IT budget, we see large enterprises spending about 11 to 12% in cybersecurity. But when it comes to SME enterprises, when I'm talking about the, again, organized SMEs who have got a decent budget also, they're still looking at about 6 to 7% only as a spending for cybersecurity of the overall IT budgets that they receive, which means that, there is far more a way to go for the SMEs. And the reason for the spending is that today I look at large enterprise and a small enterprise in a similar way. It's just that the scale is different. The number of resources or the number of employees in these two kind of enterprises may be different, but the need to safeguard your infrastructure is more or less same, right? So you still have to look at, securing your endpoints. You still have to look at securing your networks. You still have to look at securing your cloud. You still need to look at securing all the applications. So all those requirements really do not change much from a large enterprise to an SME, but the scale or the investments that today an SME is doing into cybersecurity is far less. So there are other options, other models also available where SMEs can look at a managed services kind of a model where, it's not a very capex heavy investment for the SME sector. Now, when I talk about, some of the biggest concerns that exist today for the SME enterprises, there are some misconceptions, first of all, I must say, that the SMEs have, right? First of all, they believe that, because they're a small industry, they're not at target, which I think is not the case. We've just seen some of the statistics that really talk about so many number of, about 43 to 45% of the attacks happening on the SME sector. So I think these kind of conceptions is something that the SME as a sector must really go, keep aside. And the other misconception that they have is, that, if they're looking at point solutions, only antivirus solutions, firewall solution, or any of the other point solutions like endpoint security is sufficient. I think a holistic view of what exists in your infrastructure and your devices is, is very, very critical, especially now when our perimeter has extended beyond just the enterprise walls, right? We have cloud, we have the remote users also coming into our network. We have our partners, our dealers, distributors also connecting. We have the IoT devices also coming into infrastructure. So when I look at, these misconceptions, I strongly believe looking at, all the targets, and these targets are common, like whether I'm talking about a large enterprise or a small enterprise today, right? Endpoints, applications, enterprise network, virtualization devices. I mean, this is common today with most of the SME enterprises, just like I'm reiterating that the scale may be different. The other misconception that they have is that, the TCO for end-to-end security solutions may not be justified, or it is least required, which means that, they do not want to spend a lot into the security solutions because they believe that, they may continue to invest in these solutions, but it may not still be required. And, they are quite secured because they are a small enterprise. Also, the another myth that they carry is that the cloud solutions have all the security elements. I think that's something, that the SMEs need to understand is that when I'm looking at IaaS, PaaS, or a SaaS, to some extent, your SaaS infrastructure, your SaaS applications are more or less, secure. But when you come to IaaS, PaaS, right, there's a lot around the applications, around the data, around the workloads that the ownership will still lie with the enterprises. So you really need to look beyond what your cloud service provider offers here to ensure that you have a full-fledged cloud security, for your solutions. Given the nature of threats, right? We were talking about what are some of the common threats which are there in the SME sector, and we just had some discussion a few minutes back where we were talking about some phishing attacks, which are very common in most industry sectors. There are some common things which I believe that SME as a sector must really do to counter some of these most common threats, which are the phishing attacks. And every now and then we're hearing about the malwares or the ransomware attacks, insecure password, unauthorized access, stolen identities, also the insider threats. These four, I believe, are far more common in the SME sector, besides when I'm talking about the MITM attacks or denial of service or zero-day exploits. A lot can really be done when it comes to how you want to protect your digital assets, how you want to protect the digital data. If these two are at the core of your cybersecurity strategy, most of these things can be taken care of. But in the SME sector, if you look at some of these common things, right, your insider threats, your phishing attacks, I think SME sector as such has not created the strong data security, data privacy policies, or there is not a lot of security training that has been invested into in this sector. The reason which, some of the common attacks like phishing attacks or, some of the password management techniques, etc., are not known to the employees and end users. There is a responsibility not just of the CISOs or of the C-suite, I should say overall, but it is the responsibility of every user in your entire ecosystem who is responsible and who should be keeping a continued vigilance on what's happening in terms of your infrastructure. What kind of emails are you receiving? Are you supposed to click on any of these malicious links? What kind of email IDs are you receiving some of these mails for? I mean, there is something malicious when you receive some kind of email phishing attacks, where I believe that there's a constant training that if it's given to the employees in an organization, then some of these can really be taken care of in a significant way. 70% of the enterprises really crumble to a modern day attack because of no strategy. Today it is very important when we're talking about in a large enterprise that security is becoming a board level issue. I think it is a need for security to be driven by not just the top management. Like I said, it is also requires a lot of training, a lot of skill development to each and every individual and a user. And that is where we can start looking at, reducing these number of cyber attacks in every enterprise. A lot of issues that we see is, we are having legacy architecture. We're using those point solutions like just antivirus, endpoint solutions, etc. We are not able to, we do not have a team, right? So if you look at from a resource standpoint, India does not have so many cybersecurity skilled resources available today, right? And in the SMEs, when you talk about that, challenge is again bigger because, the number of resources are even, lesser here. Now, to keep a tab of, what are the different types of signatures or, different types of threats already there in the industry, that itself is a challenge for the SME sector. Now, think about a zero-day threat, right? Security compliances are least followed as much as I know in the mid-market or in the SMB sector. There are many guidelines available today for your different industries. Like we talk about industry, you can look at IC 62443, you talk about automotive, there is, 21434 compliances, there are ISO compliances, there are some NIST directives already available. But because these are not mandatory to many industries today, a lot of these are not being adhered to, right? It's just good to have. So some practices are being adopted while some not. But I think knowing that we have, cyber threats at such large scale, it is very important for the ITs and the CISOs of different organizations to start adhering to some of these compliances, some of these best practices and guidelines to ensure that you comply not just to industry regulation as such, but also look at the entire problem, and you're able to kind of start looking at the defense mechanism in a very strong way. There is much more need to look at the visibility across, whether it's an IT or IT and OT infrastructure, access, authentication, how you control the users or the devices, and how do you manage the data is very, very critical, which is a challenge today in the SME sector. There is no clear cloud strategy. We're just looking at some cloud native solutions and deploying this into our infrastructure. There is no endpoint security, authentication being really strongly thought of in this sector. And also when I talk about the other issues, very common and which is very often noted is misconfiguration. There are software patches not updated, firmware issues are there. Encryption technologies are not being thought of, right? So there are many of these smaller issues. Now, while I talk about these as issues today, these are also some of the things that I would request SME as a sector to start looking at, because I think when you address these smaller challenges, you look at a larger goal of, achieving.
I think Parminderji, at this point, let us sort of get into the question answer mode so that we are able to I think you've really provided us a phenomenal overview and you've covered a whole lot of areas. If you permit, let's sort of get into more decoding all of that and some more essentials and basics if you're fine with that, Parminderji.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, great. So I'm now going to start the questioning. The tone of the question and answers is going to be very basic. We're going to get into the fundamentals. We're going to discuss the essentials. And we are actually going to be helping our SMEs who are on the call understand what is it that they need to do. I think Ms. Kaur has very well explained and given us a full overview of the whole gamut of what is involved in the cybersecurity activity. So I think we're now going to decode each area of that. So my first question to you, Mobeen, is what are some of the common types of cyber threats? While we are aware of the names and Parminder has talked about it, if you could just help explain that in some more basics that impact an organization both financially and can really damage their reputation. Yeah, I think Selvi, you'll have to unmute Mobeen.
Great. Thank you, Uday, and thank you, Parminderji, for this such a great background on SME sector. Being from the cyber field, I understand what the passion, what you bring to the subject. Great. And see, while we have an MSME or SME segment here, what Uday, I want to do is that, as I like your theme, saying that let's keep it simple, let's keep it, let's keep it to the ground. See, there are many threats which are coming there. Cyber attack is a big PhD subject, but what is applicable to SME segment or MSME segment? What I believe is the three things we should look at, which will have a financial impact directly. A phishing attack, it can be a spear phishing, it can be campaign. I don't want to go into details. We'll talk that later. That's one. Second thing is an awareness, cybersecurity awareness, which is not, these both are non-technical things. Saying that how do I ensure that my junior most to the senior most, and I'll say senior most is important here, is cyber aware. That's a second risk. And third thing, I don't want to say ransomware because people get scared. I'm saying that if I'm relying on technology, how do I recover from technology without having a much of an impact? These are the three things which I believe the MSME segment should take a priority just very simple phishing, cybersecurity awareness, and the data recovery without much of impact. These are the three things which I want to keep it very simple.
Yeah, Rajiv, if I request you to just expand what Mobeen has shared, as the top three items, and if you would like to add any further, but if you could just expand that, and if you could tell us that what is the kind of cybersecurity or risk management challenges that are faced by the MSMEs, and maybe if you could cover it keeping in mind people, process, technology from all of those three angles?
Thank you. I would say the challenge has been on the people side in terms of skill levels, which are not adequate in order to be able to address the kind of emerging threats. So one of the key elements has been on cyber awareness within the organizations, which is a big push globally that I also see many of the SMEs in other parts of the world as well. Now, on the upskilling side, there is a need for specific skilling to be done in the information security teams. The reason is that the information security teams have not been exposed to the kind of threats which are emerging, and their skills are pretty much dated. So that's one on the skilling side. The second is on the technology. The obsolescence of technology has been a key factor for the slow capability or less capability that we see in the market in terms of response. So detect and respond are the two things the world is struggling with. How do you detect? How soon can you detect? And how soon can you respond? So when people talk of the golden hour, from the time of the attack, one of the things has been that the golden hour was way too late. It was probably not the first 60 minutes, but it was probably the 3 hours later or 2 hours later or even much later. So the ability to detect on the tools, the shift is on the AI and machine learning. There aren't enough tools which have been created with that in mind, that you need an end-to-end platform. So again, the siloed technologies have emerged, and these siloed technologies are causing a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise in the ecosystem of an enterprise that throwing alerts, false positives, and then trying to say that how do I address it? So there is a challenge of, one, the skill. The second is the tools are not adequate, and there is a need to relook it. And that's one of the areas which the CFOs, at least in the US, have been talking is around return on security investment, ROSI. This is something which they've been speaking about and saying, if I invest $1 million, what am I getting in return? Are you going to give me the same performance, or are you going to improve the cyber resiliency? And by what degree are you going to improve? So the CIOs are measured and the CISOs are measured for the performance on the improvement. And those are the kind of factors and KPIs. So I think the challenge is also to understand the tools landscape and the lack of platformization. The third, of course, is the processes. Now, when you look at the processes, compliances have been grossly misunderstood. Compliance is just not an ISO 27001. It's not just PCI DSS, or it's not just a HIPAA, but it is the global compliances, if you need to understand. For example, the entities which are trying to do business overseas are often getting questioned about their ability to comply with global standards, which probably is not a challenge when you are inside the country. And if India has to be an MSME-centric base, which is going to be a supply chain to a lot of global vendors. So we saw, for example, in the automotive sector, in the Japanese market, and I heard about that a little earlier as well. So I have a first-hand experience there that the Japanese were looking at a lot of sourcing from India, and they were not happy with the kind of compliances that the Indian companies were coming up with. So it's the same story that you look at anything in supply chain. If India is going to be the hub for supply chain, then global compliances will have to be met no matter what. So factoring the global compliances early in a business strategy and defining the business risk from a global perspective versus an Indian perspective alone is one of the key asks. And then defining the cyber risk strategy based on the business risk, linking the two, and the countermeasures and the measures that you need to put in place is the way to really look forward. But I guess these are all challenges which,
yeah, please continue, Rajiv. I'll ask a supplementary. My question is that with, like, for example, if I'm dealing with Americas, or I'm dealing with Europe, or I'm dealing with Asia Pacific, would the regulations or the compliance requirements or the hygiene needed be different, or is there some standard that one follows?
Yeah. Yes. So each geography has its own typical asks from the customers, from the vendors ecosystem. For example, in the US, I was dealing with supply chain issues of a lot of US companies. Healthcare had a different problem. Semiconductor had a different problem. So within the same geography too, the verticals had their own different problems. Healthcare had ransomware attacks, PHI, personal health information protection issues, privacy issues. Semiconductor had IP issues. So there was a kind of very strategic shift in the way verticals were looking at cybersecurity and trying to define the problem statement as per their industry requirements. Now, again, this goes back to the industry compliances. So not everybody has the same compliance. It's not like one size fits all. It is a different compliance for a different industry in a different market. So probably there was like a few dozens of different compliances we were dealing with at any point of time in different markets, because each one had its own peculiarity and their own specific requirements. So it's, yes, very much kind of a custom to the market, customized kind of an approach to the markets. And if our MSMEs need to step up to that game, then we need to identify which market, what kind of deliverables, and what compliances you need to address, and take that into your strategy early in the game.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. I'll come back to that. So I'll park it for now, but I'm going to come back and ask you some more questions in that area. Parminder ji, for you, what I would really like you to elaborate a little bit more is what are some of the common mistakes or some misconceptions that MSMEs have, right, when it comes to cybersecurity, and how do you think they can be avoided?
I think just like what I presented sometime back, Uday, I think few misconceptions. One is, of course, the biggest is, that they are not a target, right? So I think, is it because of the scale of the business that they do? No. I am not too sure why, but I still, when I speak to a lot of end users during a lot of my conversations, when I see the kind of evaluations that they do, right, the kind of frameworks that they are looking at, I think they're still looking at a very point solution kind of investment, but I don't think that will really work in a long way. We are talking about industry compliances, right? Today, these SMEs have started small, but then they are growing. They're doing business globally, right? So they need to start looking at compliances. And there is one misconception, again, when I'm talking about is a lot of these are looking into, cloud applications. But is the cloud 100% secure, right? They need to start looking at, what they need to do beyond what the cloud service providers are doing today, right? They need to come out of the legacy. One big gap again that I see is they're not looking at a lot of threat intelligence today. While if you look at the number that I was trying to reveal earlier, there's a lot of attacks that we've seen have started to happen on the SME sector, right? Which means that I think a clearly defined cybersecurity strategy, as much as it is important today to a large enterprise, is required even for an SME, and especially if they want to do global business, then some of these compliances and again, how to protect that data or the digital asset, right? When I'm talking about any asset, server, endpoint, there has to be a holistic approach. There can't be one antivirus sitting here, one endpoint solution sitting here. And I think Mr. Rajiv perfectly talked about a platform approach, right? It is important to have a complete visibility of what's happening in your infrastructure, in your services, in your solutions, right? And if probably look at, the right partner also who can give you this complete platform approach, support you as well across all the locations where you are, willing to expand. Because otherwise, you'll again end up in the same story of, some point solutions, different solutions. And what also happens is when you're having different clouds, you are having different policies in one cloud, you're having different policy in the second cloud. How do you really want your organization to look at these policies? So there has to be one single perspective of how and what are your organization goals towards, the cybersecurity, right, for your enterprise. So when you're looking at digital technologies, when you're looking at different solutions, I think one is move away from the point solutions. And please do not think that you're the last one going to be attacked. I think today, every industry, every sector whether you're large, small, whether you're an industrial, you're an automotive utility, or you're a bank today, I think, equally vulnerable, I must say.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Mubin, I have a very interesting question here for you, right? I really want you to help our MSMEs on the call today. See, there were a lot of terms that Rajiv ji and Parminder ji talked about. They talked about compliance, hygiene, for global businesses. Now, is it essential that if I'm a 50 crore company and I have become a 250 crore company, let's say I'm growing, right? I'm in the MSME category. And traditionally, I've had a technology officer in my organization. Is it necessary now I have to get a CISO? Where do I get all of this information? Do I have to engage a consulting company like yours, Mubin, or Rajiv ji or Parminder ji to really help me define all of this? How do I go about doing all of this and ensuring that I'm compliant, with my organization and that I'm going to be fully protected from cyber attacks? So if you could throw more light on that and really help our members on the call, that would be good, helpful.
Correct, correct. And see, I always take cyber as not a compliance thing only, or not a risk prone thing. I want us at the MSME sector also to look at the cyber as an enabler, cyber as one of the differentiator. And while I'm going to give a very different examples, but just example from large company. Let's take an example of Apple. The face authentication on our iPhone is not the first time which Apple brought in to the phone companies or the phones. It was there with Android, but the Apple used it as an aspirational feature in their iPhone, where face authentication is nothing but a cyber security, right? Security, and they used it for their differentiation in their product. Now, Apple is a large company. What message I want to give is that as a MSME also should look at the cyber as one of the enabler. That's one point in time. Second, what question you ask is that if I'm moving from, let's say, 50 crore bracket to 250 or 500 crore bracket in the, let's say, small to medium enterprises, do I need to have a structure to manage my security? The answer invariably is yes. Now, how do I do that in my growth engine, growth trajectory is what a DNA of every organization needs to align to. See, one of the myths, and which I want to take it forward to Parminder and answer this question to you, is that one of the myths which most of the MSME comes that security implementation, whether it's a platform implementation, point implementation, or the skills. Let's not talk about the skill first, but the security solutions. Most of the people think that are very costly solutions, very not prohibitive solutions in terms of cost. But I want to say this one, the government of India, for that matter, or so other industry bodies or Data Security Council of India, they are doing many things in this area to give this point in time solutions, or to give the solutions which can reduce that risk very significantly. So as an MSME or medium or small enterprise, I should be aware of that. I should be aware of saying that these are the solutions which are available, which are tested by the authoritative entities, and they are made available for the security small and medium enterprises to reduce their risk exposure. I'll give one example here again. The company called, or the organization called, as a non-profit cyber. They have 121 solutions. They are the originator from the London police and New York police together. They have 121 solutions which are free of cost to be used by the small and medium enterprises. But the implementation of those in our organization has to be, as Rajiv said, is that one size doesn't fit for all. I take it forward saying that one solution does not plug into it. How the feasibility of it, adoption of it is very important. So my answer to your question is that yes, if I'm moving from 50 to 250, I need to have a structure. Do I attract the skill, or do I develop the skill, or today's mantra is, do I reskill somebody internally? We should do that. Use the right technology, use the tools, but everything has to move in what is your requirement. Just because the company A did this, company C did this, so I as a company B, I should do this. That's not what one should do. And that's where whether you approach a consultant or whether you approach the right set of people, I'm sure every the management who runs the 500 crore company understand that very well. My only request to them that if you are implementing something, if you are adopting something, adopt as per your need rather than generic adoption.
So Mubin, just a follow-on question. You talked about some 100 or 120 solutions being available, right?
Correct.
So can you elaborate on a little bit on that? What is this solution about? What are we talking?
So I'll tell you, give a simple example. And as I said, see, I believe firmly fishing is an industry agnostic, size agnostic, but the impact of fishing, let's say take an example. If a company is of 2,000 crore, a fishing mail comes and 8 lakh rupees goes from that financial impact of 8 lakh rupees for a 2,000 crore company is less. But I have my micro sector where the 1 crore is my turnover and 8 lakh rupees goes as a phishing attack, the impact is huge. Now, what I'm trying to say is that in our MSME segment, phishing is the biggest risk because the people not aware. Now, for phishing, I need to identify a simple example. I'll give you a simple example, and everybody will know that if my CEO is asking me to send me money to a finance team, the mail is coming within the domain of a company. So let's say from Uday's company, Uday is asking his finance controller to release the money. The mail will come from within the company to within the company, not the mail going outside. So simple way of identifying this risk is that whether the Uday has really sent the mail. So then what we do is that we go ahead and say that any mail which is coming outside the company, we color code it. Now for that, a simple requirement, it is available into the paid services, but this is available into the non-paid services also. So do I need to go and buy some high profile tools, or do I just go ahead and there are various tools available, like DSA has a cyber suraksha. We have the ransomware cleaning up service in the DSCI. Non-profit cyber has 121 very small but very directed tools available, which everybody should take an advantage of it.
Thank you, Mubin.
And there was one comment. Sorry, there was one comment. Cyber as a service. See, we are in the world of cloud where everything as a service comes in picture. And I also believe cyber as a service should be taken with the right intent and with the right requirement. See, if I come as a cyber as a service, what is your risk? See, again, everything is exposed to what is your risk. And we should always think that if my risk is 1 to 10, I should put police, people, process, and technology for that 1 to 10, not for 1 to 100. So risk-based approach is very important in cyber.
Thanks for clarifying that for our member. So Rajiv ji, my question to you again, one of the questions that came from our MSMEs, and what they're saying is that large corporations, right, despite making significant investments in cybersecurity, are still vulnerable to attacks like ransomware, the attack at AIIMS Delhi, right, and the misconfigured public bucket at Microsoft, which impacted 2.4 terabytes of data, 65,000 entities from 111 countries. So does this suggest that investments in cybersecurity may never be sufficient?
You know, there's a statement by the former FBI director, Robert Mueller. There are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be. So I guess size doesn't matter. What matters is when are you going to be hacked and what are you going to do about it? So I think the answer lies in improving our defenses, sharpening our people part of it, because at the end of the day, it's the human that is common to all, whether the size of the company doesn't matter. So the skill of the person who works for you as an employee or a third party who's working, third party, fourth party, fifth party, nth party, all of these are the ones who actually will determine when you're likely to be hacked. Now, many of the organizations are not even aware when they get hacked. Those who get hacked probably know only when there's a lot of losses that they have incurred, and it's public. It has happened to a lot. So I guess the answer lies in that prepare for limiting the losses and make sure your defenses are such that you can recover from the losses, recover from an attack, So have a good incident response plan, have a good strategy on your with a zero trust, and keep your cyber insurance as much as you can manage it. And I think that the rest of it is all if and when it happens.
Great. You talked about zero trust. I do have a question later on, but it would be good if you could
Yeah.
just share a little bit more about the zero trust architecture and tell our viewers what it is all about.
It is simplified. If you were to say zero trust is basically when you don't trust anything. Nothing is trusted. Everything has to be verified, validated before you allow. For example, the world that we are now living in is that you can't be building a military grade kind of an environment, but at the same time you have to do business because you have got to do business. So you can't be doing that. However, you have to have certain things which are completely, secured from external or any even internal elements that could actually get access to. So data access is one of the key things which around which zero trust has been a very important topic. So there are frameworks available on how to implement zero trust. Zero trust is a way of going about your cybersecurity. It's not a compliance requirement, but it's a way of how you actually implement your cybersecurity strategy. So in the US NSA, there is a saying, crawl, walk, run. There are only 3 ways of doing this. Either you're crawling with this, you walk with it, or run, depending on the stage at which you are in your organization, the cyber resiliency. The maturity of a company will determine what stage you are in and what steps you need to take. So it's a journey. It starts with a initial set of things. So every state has got its own sets of recommendations, which one goes through. So we've done some implementations on this in some parts of the world, where we have seen organizations struggle to understand how to go about zero trust. Buying a product is not zero trust. Buying a technology and thinking that I have a technology that will give me zero trust, not zero trust. It is the entire approach of the company. And that's again comes to that cultural thing and so many other things that follow. So we have worked with organizations to know that unless the culture shifts, this is not going to happen. Zero trust is also a part of the cultural change that is happening across the world. Leadership is now interested to actually know what is zero trust and also trying to see that when it is applied, is it really successful or not? Has anything changed? So it's like a journey which you need to go through over a period of several months before you can actually even achieve a zero trust.
Yeah. So I'll come to you, Parminder ji, but I just want to sort of interject out here. I remember Mubin having attended one of your other webinars in the past, and you had a very interesting way of explaining zero trust. So would you like to sort of add to whatever Rajiv ji has just said? You need to be unmuted.
She is unmuted. Ms. Kaur, you're unmute.
No, Mubin Sheikh. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think he's still mute.
Yeah, this is also a zero trust, right? Okay, so before I answer to your question on zero trust, and I think I like one question which you asked is that same, right, boss? The large companies are getting hacked. They have a huge budget. Goldman Sachs, the public information says that they have a security budget of $2 billion, and still there is an attack. So very, very valid question saying that if they are putting a $2 billion security, I'm the 50 crore company, so I will also get attacked. But one thing which I want to pass on to all the audience is that number of cybersecurity technologies is not directly proportional to one less number of attacks. No, it will not happen. The people part is very important. That's the key. Now I think Rajiv ji explained what's a zero trust, but I'll give an example, a more simpler example, Rajiv ji, with your due respect. See what we are doing, right? And I don't want to use a technical terminology here. See, when we open the lock of our apartment or house, once you enter the house, you go to the hall, you go to the kitchen, you go to the bedroom, you go to the washroom, you have an access to everything. So in an organization also, when you log in, let's say you are using some centralized authentication, when you are logging in centralized authentication, where you have access to a laptop, you have access to a file server, you have access to email, you have access to your HR system, you have access to, let's say, some supply chain in-house applications. So what you are doing, that you are trusting, if a individual got authenticated or authorized on the laptop or authenticated, he can access certain resources in an organization. What Rajivji also is trying to say through the Zero Trust Network is that when an individual or when the resource moves laterally in the organization or horizontally in the organization, just blindly don't trust individual. You need to ensure that if Mubin is logged into the laptop and Mubin is accessing the HR system in the night 3 a.m., is it required? Why Mubin is accessing the HR system in the night 3 a.m.? So there, what we are saying, that there you throw a challenge, there you validate the session again, there you ensure that some kind of a behavioral analytics is being done so that you are accessing the required things as per your roles. The principles remains the same. Zero trust for me, and what Rajiv said very rightly, is not a tool or application or any system implementation. It's a philosophy. It needs to be implemented the way your organizations needs it. And simple example, and Raju, Uday, some of people on the call may get this thing. See, small and medium enterprises are the proprietor driven or the large home businesses, or sometimes what happens is that the technology team is not ready to question the bosses. So, and boss has been given the complete access, or some of the key individuals are being given the complete access. I believe one of the zero trust principle which MSME sector should implement is that need to have principle of the access requirement. Does this individual and his job description requires that person to have the access to these resources? Let's start with that principle, and I'm sure, and let's start asking the questions to the bosses, to the individuals, saying that why do you need this access? That's where the cybersecurity will play an important role.
Thank you, Mubin. Thank you, Rajiv ji. Parminder ji, my question to you, and a googly to you actually. So now, we've heard a lot of things. So if we have to tell the MSMEs, right, they have limited budgets. That's the point that you have to keep in mind while I'm addressing this question. What would be the top 3 things that you would say that they need to start with to secure the cybersecurity within their organization?
See, budget constraints, something SME sector, we've witnessed that most of the times, right? So I know they don't really come with a lot of great budgets, but at the same time, knowing that this is such a pressing issue today across the industries, there is already a stage, I will say a maturity that most organizations would already have, right? And no two organizations will be, similar in their journey, in their investments today on cybersecurity. First, I think most important, the kinds of threats that are there in the SME sector. I think security awareness, security training, one important thing they must invest, right? There is second thing I believe is there is going to be shortage of resources, right? So I think we were already talking about reskilling, upskilling resources. It is going to be very, very important. So from a training awareness standpoint, I think this has to be the first step, because as long as they do not know, what are their aspirations, okay? If the company has got at least one strategy, okay, that this year I want to look at a zero trust policy, right? So I think that's very, very critical today, because there are different frameworks, different approaches available, out there in the industry. But I think at one given time, given the budget constraints, I don't think that the SME as a sector will have the flexibility to do 10 things, at a time. So while parallelly looking at the training aspects, building the security awareness, building that culture, which is very, very important, I think start to work on that zero trust, because once you have a framework or an approach on zero trust, I think the access authentication, what is the privileges that you give to the user, right? So I think we're talking about least privilege access. You'll be looking at the behavioral analytics, what that user is doing when that user is in your network, right? It is very, very important. So I think one is the training aspect. Second is your skilling aspect, which is very important. Third thing will be to look at from all the other things, because see, somewhere all these point solutions already exist in the SMEs today, right? So there must be an antivirus sitting somewhere, there must be an endpoint security solution. There are firewalls, I'm sure, already there. But what is that a user, or what is that data doing after it crosses your firewall, right? So I think most breaches can really be avoided in an SME. If I have to look at only an SME per se, basis the kind of user analytics that they can do. Can they really stop the users to access some of the key applications if they are not permitted? So those role-based permissions will be very, very important. Behavioral analysis after that, user or that device is in your infrastructure. And last, I think I would want to talk about, is on the threat intelligence. I think SMEs today do not have that data. So if you look at the threat intel piece, I know it's a huge story when I talk about threat intel, because you'll start really pulling up your data across different infrastructure devices. Take that holistic view. Today they are challenged, and I know that it's from a cost standpoint it may be a huge challenge. It is why probably after a zero trust I can talk about threat intel, but somewhere all this cannot work in silos, right? Somewhere it has to be a complete story, right? So threat visibility, I think, is completely missing today in an SME to an extent. So like Mr. Rajiv and Mr. Mubin mentioned earlier, some of them don't even know that they're breached, right? So the time that they take to detect the breach, the time that they take to remediate is huge. And even that small attack to them, right, may really financially impact them a lot, right? So I think start looking at threat intel piece, start looking at a zero trust policy. Other than that, there has to be a parallel approach to training and building that awareness culture.
Thank you. So Rajiv, my question to you, I have a couple of questions that I've clubbed together for you. And, this is primarily MSMEs are also dependent on third-party vendors, right? So they would outsource some part of their business to third-party companies. And it's not necessary that all of them are have strong cybersecurity practices in place for their own organizations. Especially, in a global supply chain kind of an environment, this becomes very critical. So maybe if you could throw some, if you could give us some guidance to the MSMEs, and how do you manage all of that? And also the role of cybersecurity insurance. So if you could, probably I've clubbed a few questions there, but if you could pick that up.
So there is a kind of a attention that we see right now around risk prioritization. So when you're looking at risks, you're looking at starting from an enterprise risk, and you're trying to score the different elements in the enterprise on the kind of score of risk score that they bring in. So there is a Bayesian methodology in the MIT, which actually talks about creating that score in the context of the environment that you are in, right? So let's say for a moment, this risk scoring prioritizes the highest risk and then goes up to the lowest risk in the organization. So what it does is it gives you the optimization of your time and effort in terms of directly relating to the most critical risks of your organization. Therefore, you are able to spend your time and address timeliness in the addressing is very important. The resources are not unlimited. So using the resources to address the most critical issues, I think that's what one is able to achieve. So identifying this and then going to the root cause analysis is a really big ask. What caused that risk to be to the extent it was? How can we fix it? So there's something called a short-term, medium-term plan. There's no long-term plan, by the way. There's only short and medium term. So short and medium term, what are we going to do in order to reduce the risk we found in the top 10 issues that we found in the company? I think those are actions that one takes. Now, when you've done this risk prioritization and scoring, it also gives you an opportunity to quantify that risk in dollar terms. So you're saying if the risk is of a certain score in terms of liability, you're able to actually define if there was a breach, what would be the kind of liability. So it gives the CFO a good idea of what he needs to be aware about, and also make his, the kind of actions that he needs from his budgeting perspective in terms of the plan on where you need to invest. And this has been very effectively used by CIOs and CISOs to be able to justify their actions. Because there was always this gray area, who's right? And it's always the CFO who seemed to be right because he had the budgets, and the CIO can only say, yes, sir. So at the end of the day, this problem has been more or less addressed when you can quantify the risk. Your cybersecurity insurance coverage plan is also determined by the amount of liability one is looking at. You're also able to look at the premium. Currently, the trend is towards underwriting the premium every quarter because the risks are so significantly fluctuating in an enterprise that you can't really even look at a 1 year period. You're looking at a quarterly period. It's a very tough situation for an enterprise. So keeping the consistency in performance in terms of the cyber resiliency and the maturity is of topmost importance to organizations around. So I guess the insurance part is telling us, take care of it on a continuous basis and don't come back on a quarterly basis and tell us that you know what you have done. So continuous risk assessment and compliance reporting has become an extremely important part. That how you report compliances on a continuous basis, and your ability should be not people-based reporting, but it's a system-based reporting, which can be interpreted by the people, but can't be people putting Excel sheets together and trying to create the risk and trying to project. So this is the level at which insurances companies are also now insisting, even before they give a cover, what is the risk in the organization, and they take a call, whether to even insure a company or not. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to now make it a little bit more interesting. So looking for some rapid responses. There's some very basic questions that have come from our members, and they really want to know and get some solutions from all of you. So primarily, the first one is, and maybe I'll go round robin here. So Mubin, I'll start with you. Okay, there's a question that's come up, so let me address that first. Do we have data about value of cyber frauds happened in the last 2 years? That's from Glow COO. Anybody who can take that? Do we have data about value of cyber frauds that have happened within MSME in the last 2 years?
So if I can take a shot there, Uday, so whatever the latest which all we are, cyber crime is a $1 trillion economy. So there is no cut for the MSME segment. And see, another thing in India is that by culture, if something goes wrong to us, and that's where I think Parminder ji touched upon the certain regulation. If something goes wrong to us as a culture, we do not want to expose or we do not want to report that. So the challenge with the cyber frauds or cyber crimes in India is that unless until they are very significant and somewhere brought under the regulation, they don't get reported. But the cyber crime is a $1 trillion technology. So that's what I want to just answer to that question.
Thank you. Okay, so coming back to my series of questions, I'm going to be just posing these terms, and maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on that. So how can Indian MSME organization, a small, medium-sized company, could range from 50 crores to 250 crores growing up, protect by using strong passwords? Let me start with you, Mubin.
Use the passphrase. Passwords are gone. Use the passphrase and use the passphrase in your mother tongue. So if I'm from Mumbai, instead of using my password, let's say so much complex, I can say that Mala bhook lagli hai. I can use that in this language. So it's important for us to understand saying that the more complex we make it, see, and passwords, last 20 years I'm in this field, everybody's saying that capital, small, but somewhere if you make that as complex as much to remember, I'm going to write down somewhere. So what I'm saying that beat the all password hashes, beat the password in dictionary of global, use the vernacular language, and instead of a password as a word, use the passphrase. That's the first, and a very simple, very effective way of telling you that.
Yeah, and Parminder ji, to use, how do you protect against ransomware attacks? What do you think would be some of the solutions there?
See, honestly, today when I'm talking about malware, ransomware is just, one type. So there are different malwares already there. And it could happen anywhere, right? It could be at the endpoint, it could be at the server, right? Anywhere. So I think we still really need to look at every device in the infrastructure, every probable area where the cyber attacker can really come, sit and extract the data or deny a service to you. So I think we need to take complete holistic view of our infrastructure. We really need to protect from malware. It can't be just one solution.
Thank you. Rajiv ji, protect against phishing attacks and other social engineering tactics.
I think it starts with awareness, the trainings, and the more you practice.
So can you elaborate, Rajiv ji, a little bit more on what kind of training we should be? Do we engage companies to do that? How do you go about, like for these companies? Yeah, so yeah.
These are simulations. So you simulate these attacks, and basis that you check the alertness and the ability of the employees in order to know how they actually fared.
And to be able to do that, Rajiv, sorry, I'm interrupting. I mean, one would engage organization like yours or EY or,
Yeah. There are plenty of organizations who can do this.
Okay.
And they run the thing like a program where you actually measure the effectiveness of the program as well by virtue of the number of people who actually continue to be there who get phished. So example, the improvement score would then give you an idea as to how your organization is faring over a period of time. And if you find that there are certain population of people who are actually not improving, then you need to really have a kind of a plan to help them come out of that state and become better. Because they are at the end of the day, a human is only the weakest link in the entire organization.
Yeah.
Even one person can actually do what you can have the best defenses, but then one person can actually still lead you to that downfall. Yeah.
Uday, if I can just add to what Rajiv said,
Please,
just
yeah.
30 seconds. See, awareness is the key. When you do a cyber awareness, when you tell a person by showing that these are the phishing emails, these are the 10 things you should look out in the phishing email, as simple as that. And then you have an awareness saying that anything wrong happening in our organization, if you noticed, please either email us or call us on this hotline number. Now, how is the effectiveness of that is important. If after my cybersecurity awareness session, the number of calls to hotline are increasing, don't get worried. It's a effectiveness of your awareness that the number of calls of hotline are increased. There's an awareness has increased. So you need to just look in a different perspective. If somebody is reporting the incident, don't penalize him. Just appreciate that he's reporting, because there are so many things goes under carpet. So I think in medium and small enterprises, that's the cultural changes which we need to bring in.
Right.
Just one more thing, just to add over there, one last thing. There's also an effort to use AI and machine learning in the platforms in cyber defense. You build playbooks that are able to really add like a deterrent to any phishing and such kind of social engineering attacks. So we have successfully seen this happening where you are able to prevent those kind of attacks using the platform in the managed services and the monitoring center itself being able to block it and prevent it. Just another point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uday, just
Yes,
to add,
yes,
like
yes.
this training cannot be limited to few teams, right? It has to be a part of the mass training culture of that organization, right? So if there's a compliance associated to these cyber trainings, then I'm sure that the development of the resources within that organization is huge. So I think these trainings should really come as compliances to the organization, and should be really evaluated, like Mr. Rajiv said, quarter on quarter, year on year, to see how your users have really learned or got trained on those particular cyber trainings. It could be different topics there.
Yeah, thank you, Parminder ji. Again, just to continue with this, Mubin, for you is, protect the data from being accessed or stolen by unauthorized parties, or prevent data loss, breaches. What just at a very high level, if you could tell what one can do.
Yeah, I mean, Uday, that's a very difficult and big topic. See, but one thing from the micro sectors, or let's say small and micro, small and medium, all three enterprises. See, disgruntled employee. That's the one risk which all of us carry. So if I'm talking about the non-technology companies,
Insider threat kind of.
insider threat, or the somebody who has resigned and waiting in the notice period. See, let's take an example of automobile industry. If I'm an automobile manufacturer, or I'm a component manufacturer, the IP is very important for me. So intellectual property management is very important to me. And the what I say, disgruntled employee or the insider threat, this is one area where things get a little bit lenient, if I may use that word, saying that we do not give so much of importance to them. And that's where I think data protection as a subject, while the protection against the external world is important, I will do certain things based on my organization's playbook. But this one area which I think we as an because see, again, look at the construct of this organization. The trust plays a very important role in this organization. And where the trust is there, it gets easily broken. So for the data protection, I believe, while there are a lot many solutions, please have this area also being addressed as an insider threat. And from the technology perspective, as we all say, right, you go to the large companies or you go to the small companies, you go to the single proprietor driven business or go to the individual, data loss is the key. And ransomware is the one place where you will lose the data, or you will not be able to get the data back. So my important aspect to all medias, all small and medium enterprises is that please ensure that your critical data is backed up. When you have any kind of, and that data is available in terms of emergency. So what Rajiv said, continuity risk or compliance is also very important. So please ensure that you put a focus on data loss. May happen, may not happen, but if the data loss happens, I have a data to recover. So insider threat and data recovery, these are the two different things which we should focus on apart from the various routine things, what I would suggest.
So regularly backing up data and having a disaster recovery.
Yes.
Great, thank you. My last in this series would be to you, Parminder ji, is, everybody's migrating towards the cloud. So how do you ensure that you are protecting and securing your cloud environments with regards to cybersecurity?
See, like I mentioned earlier, like there is a certain role of a cloud service provider, and they will do that. But then when it comes to infrastructure as service, if you look at PaaS platforms, there is a lot that you as a enterprise need to do on the application and on the data, right? You need to protect your workloads. So I think workload protection is one of the critical aspects that I see. Of course, there are CASB solutions available. There is, when you talk about the entire cloud spectrum, right? You look at the secure web gateway. You look at securing WAF. Protecting from DDoS. There are multiple things that you can look into. But I think ownership of the enterprise is something that often goes missing in many cases because they assume that everything is going to be secured in the cloud. So I think enterprises must closely look at workload protection in a bigger way, and also like I mentioned, right? So cloud is going to have multiple products and solutions associated. So how are you going to monitor and also control the users and the access to the cloud, right? I think it is going to become very, very important. So I think each element of cloud has to be considered in a way that, from the access that you offer, who can access, what it can access, and also, how you're going to protect all those workloads. Each aspect is going to be very, very important.
Yeah, thank you. My last question to all of you, and I'll start with Rajiv ji and then end it with you, Parminder ji, is that if I have to select the right provider to help me, with the complexity of ensuring that I get all of the cybersecurity related activities in place in my organization. We've got just a couple of minutes. So Rajiv ji, at whatever high level you can, just tell us what would that be? How do I select the right provider, to be the right person, the company for my organization to set it all up?
You're looking at security as a service, not really just a point product that you have somebody come and manage for you. So there's a lot of that, what we call as a convergence of different vendors into one strategic vendor. So I'm referring to a strategic vendor who would probably have the ability to provide security as a service end to end, and being able to report on a timely basis to the management. So dashboarding has become one of the things that one looks for. How good is your dashboard of reporting on a real-time basis of the threats that are emerging and the status? That's one. The second is your flexibility to scale up and scale down. The obsolescence of technology is on the provider, not on the customer. So it's obviously the reason is that how quickly can you remove a technology if you find it to be ineffective and replace it with something else? So it's outcome based. So looking at an outcome based provider who's on a unit of measure for services, which means that your licensing and your providing of the services based on the kind of sizing of the organization, and it's not like a generic overview that you just provide a general service. So it's unit of measure based, it's scalable, it's modular, it's outcome based, and the SLAs have to be defined in advance and linked to the business risk.
Thank you. Mubin?
Yeah, Uday, it's a very difficult question. See, everybody's needs are different. See, when you are selecting a vendor, as rightly said, strategy is very important. You need to ensure that you have a strategic vendor. But what I want to say is that whether you bring the vendor, whether you bring the external help, and you had asked me saying that if I have to hire a CISO, what should I do? My suggestion for the small and micro segment industry, not the medium sector, medium enterprises, is that if you have an individual who is passionate enough, if you see a in-house talent, please reskill that person, because kind of ownership you will get from that reskilled person in-house is completely different than what you will get externally. And then the strategic vendor partner is always important, because see, companies like us or different companies will come and give you a roadmap saying that what we bring on the table is that companies like you in your sector of your size, what the others doing, what is important for you, this the knowledge what we bring, and what and that strategic input can be taken to develop a roadmap. I also believe is that you need to have the conflict of interest sorted out. So strategic partner should be different than the implementation partner, so that you can get the best out of both.
Yeah, thank you, Mubin. Parminder ji, just we got a minute, so if you could give us.
I'll keep it very short. I think Rajiv and Mubin have already answered. So putting myself in, say, at the shoe of an SME today, where I may already be in some journey, I think it is important to look at a provider who can support most of the existing infrastructure first. Okay, so if you're looking at a managed SOC for your premise, a partner. See, today none of the telcos and none of the system integrators, anybody in this ecosystem is able to completely give end-to-end without all these strategic partnerships. So they are already in that process where the telcos, where the system integrators, where the OEMs have come together to offer a comprehensive service to the end users. So you can look at what assets you already have, look at the partnerships that your service provider can really offer you, and whether they can actually build on and add value to your existing assets, to your existing solutions. And secondly, if they can actually give you a managed model, and they can also give you an OpEx based model, considering SME, and they may want to look at some recurring cost and not a very high CapEx driven investment. I think they can evaluate that with their service provider if they can enter into that kind of a value proposition with them.
Thank you. From my side, thank you, Mubin Sheikh. Thank you, Mr. Rajiv Singh. And thank you, Ms. Parminder Kaur. Over to you, Selvi.
Thank you very much. And as we come to the end of this highly knowledgeable and timely session, may I request Dr. Pradeep Pense, Co-Chairman, IMC Digital Technology Committee, to present the vote of thanks. Over to you, Dr. Pense.
Thanks, Selvi, and thanks to all the speakers, Parminder Kaur, Mubin Sheikh, and Mr. Rajiv Singh. I think it was a wonderful session, and of course, ably managed by Uday Sanghani of the Digital Committee. I think just some quick takeaways that at least I thought were very important, coming from Mr. Singhania first, in terms of the importance of cybersecurity from the standpoint of the MSME sector, which was further elaborated, of course, by Ms. Parminder Singh Kaur. And I think she gave a lot of the interesting points, which I thought were the myths that she busted, and which we, I think, as MSMEs many a times carry forward. We generally believe that we are not a target, and I think that's one major myth which we busted in the process. Mr. Mubin talked of some very interesting points, and particularly the point which I liked was cyber as the enabler. I think that was something which stuck in my mind, and do the right thing. I think the appropriate choice of everything that you do is something which he emphasized. And Mr. Rajiv talked and sort of demystified a lot of aspects of cybersecurity, and the most important one which I remember is that of the sense and response. I think that's something which is fundamental, and making the entire organization culture to sense and response is something which is the challenge which we need to work on. It's not just about point tools, but trying to ensure that we do respond in time. And the whole thought of zero trust, I think all the speakers spoke elaborately about it. And thanks, Uday Sanghani. I think you did a wonderful job. It was a difficult topic, but you made it sound easy for us by the kind of questions that you raised.
Thank you, Dr.
That's all from me, and thanks all the participants for joining us. Mr. Samir Somaya, our Vice President, would have loved to be here, and he would have actually given the vote of thanks, but for some reason he's not there. But it's been my pleasure and fortune to give that vote of thanks. Thanks.
Actually, he's trapped. Make it,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you to
Thank you.
all the speakers. We really had a wonderful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.